Hello everyone, Daniel Yuck here. Thank you all for tuning in today. I appreciate you. In today's video, I would like to take some time and I want to touch base on how to prevent shaky lines. Within this video, I also want to touch base on some of the main causes as to why shaky lines happen. Should you have any questions at all at any point throughout this video, I'm going to highly encourage you to drop a comment below. I'm going to do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive straight on into this. So I will leave links for you in the description below to the gear that I'm going to be using here in this demonstration. As you can see, I have an assortment of needles that I'm going to use to demonstrate my points. All of these can be found in the link in the description, and that will take you to my Amazon store, and this is for Real Skin. That'll take you to the Real Skin site where I picked up these Real Skins. And also I'm going to be using the Ink Claw Dagger tattoo machine with the X6 wireless power supply. I believe that's the X6 by Drago Art. So that's everything that I'm using here for this demonstration for those who are curious. Now that we're caught up to speed with what I'm going to be using to demonstrate here today, I'm going to touch base on some of the main reasons why I've experienced shaky lines. And this may vary from person to person. If you have any other reasons that I don't list, drop them in the comment section below. I'm eager to hear what you've experienced on your end. But for me, one of the main reasons that I've experienced wobbly lines or shaky lines on my end is because I simply didn't understand the fundamentals of tattooing. I didn't understand that I needed to know where I'm going to pull my line, not only where I'm going to be pulling the line, but what direction I'm going, how deep I'm going. I wasn't familiar with hand speed and voltage. There is a lot of moving components when we tattoo that all have to be aligned for us to achieve readable, presentable results. For me, when I first started, I was experiencing a lot of shaky lines when I just simply wasn't familiar with the fundamentals, when I was unable to plan out my tattoos. Another main reason that I experienced shaky lines in the past was because I'm simply moving way too fast for what's good for me. So let's say I'm moving in a direction that may be comfortable, however, I may pick up the hand speed and I may end up wobbling or a little bit, or the direction that I'm going isn't quite comfortable. That's another one that'll actually cause some wobble and some shake when I am tattooing. So moving too fast, haven't learned the fundamentals are some of the top two. Another reason that I've experienced a wobbling on my end is when I hang out my needle a bit too far. So in the past, I used to just hang out my needle ridiculously far. I guess that's just me developing and getting to where I was going. And upon hanging it out more than what was good for me, I would experience the needle kind of wobble in the cart tube like that, and it would just wobble a little bit, and you would see it in the line. So therefore, I kind of had to double up and sculpt that line a little bit. That was something that I wasn't really fond of. Didn't really matter which needle I was using. I was just hanging out my needle way too far and I was just experiencing that needle wobble. That's another main reason why I've experienced shaky lines on my end. Another reason why I've personally experienced shaky lines is because the direction that I am moving in, or the range of the line that I was trying to tattoo, was just simply out of my range or out of my comfort zone. So therefore, let's say if I was pulling a line away from me and I'm kind of bending my wrist like this and holding my machine around here, I'm gonna kind of start wobbling a little bit. So when I try to push a line too far more than what's good for me, that's also when I've experienced some wobble. Some of the last two main reasons that come to mind where I've experienced shaky lines is when I'm uncomfortable with the gear that I'm using. When I first started, I started using coil machines originally, and something about the setup, whether it was the smaller tube size, because I really need a fat grip size, I'm more comfortable with that. And when I first started, I was using coil machines with tinier tubes, so it was really hard for me to find flow and to be comfortable with that setup, especially with the coil machine kind of hanging back right here. It just really wasn't my style. It wasn't until I switched over to pen style tattoo machines is where I started getting really fluid with it all. And that is another reason why I've personally experienced shaky lines, is just because simply I wasn't comfortable with the gear that I was using. This last one here is where I personally have experienced the most shaky lines, and it's basically the smaller the needle configuration goes, the more our imperfections are going to show. So if we don't have time under smaller needle configurations such as this bug pin 3-round liner, then it's going to show when we tattoo with it. So let's say if I were to pull lines here with the bug pin 3-round liner on this fake skin, you're going to see every single perfection. Let's say if I pull a line with the standard 11 round shader, my imperfections are going to show a lot less because it's a thicker needle configuration. So the smaller we go in needle size when it comes to round shaders or round liners, the more our imperfections are going to show. I'm going to personally touch base on all of that. I'm going to demonstrate some differences here between some thinner line weights and some thicker line weights, so that way we can get a good idea as to what we can expect. And I'm also going to show you all how we can go about preventing shaky lines and give you all some exercises as well. By the end of the video, you will be well acquainted and have more information to use on your end. At this point, we should be a bit more familiar with as to what causes shaky lines. Now let's get into the aspect on how we can go about preventing them. Well, first and foremost, we're going to want to have developed some rapport, at least understand the fundamentals of pulling lines and practice the basics. So at the very least, we're going to start with learning the fundamentals of lining, and I'm going to touch base slightly on that. I have full in-depth videos where I show you how I go about matching hand speed and voltage. I have other videos about lining. So if you check out my channel, you will find more information on what you need. If you can't, drop it in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to assist you there. So we get familiar with the fundamentals and we get familiar with the gear that we are going to be using. And then from there, you can start learning directions, what direction works best for you, some improper directions of tattooing, and what is appropriate for the designs that you're doing. Over time, you're going to be able to make better choices as well. So in terms of what directions you should be going, find out what's comfortable, and over time, this is going to start coming naturally to you. One of my main rule of thumbs is if I can't plan out the tattoo, I'm not going to accept it. So if you can't plan out your tattoo from start to finish, if you don't know how to do this area or this part of a tattoo, if you're having to wing this area, then it's probably a little bit outside of our capability and or style range. So knowing how to plan out your tattoos is also crucial, and that's also going to help you prevent shaky lines, because you're going to know where you're going the entire way of the stencil. None of the stencil is going to get lost. You're going to be able to A and B your entire way through the tattoo until you are completed, which is exactly where we want to be. If you can't plan it out, don't accept it. At the end of the day, we are all humans, so no line is necessarily 100% proof perfect. I don't believe in that. However, we can do the best of our abilities and we can provide good quality work still. And another thing here that helps me go about preventing shaky lines along with these other variables is having a good posture when I'm tattooing, being able to stabilize my hand in ways that are comfortable for me. I'm also going to get into that here shortly. Now that we are acquainted with this information, I want to get into the demonstration aspect, and I want to do some shaky lines, and I want to try and pull some smooth lines with you all here, and I want to touch base on the demonstrations and points that I'm trying to make here in this video. So let's switch on over to a different angle. Let's get into that. So for this demonstration, I'm going to start off with this Ambition T-Rex bug pin 3-round liner needle right here. And I'm going to pull some lines right here, and I'm going to see how straight that I can get it. I'm going to just simply imagine a line right here. I'm going to pull it all the way straight down, and I'm going to see how straight that we can get this line. And I want to demonstrate that the smaller the needle configuration, the harder it is to pull straighter lines. And pulling consistent, clean lines with smaller needle configurations is something that we need to develop and work into. So if you're not pulling clean lines with smaller needles, I would recommend that you don't get discouraged and just to keep practicing, keep trying, try different lines, try different designs, and just keep going with it. The longer you do it, the more better you'll get over time. When it comes to smaller needle configurations like this, I typically run at around 5 to 6 volts. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be pushing it down to 5.5. I'm just going to be using the very tip of the needle, and again, just to confirm, I'm going to pull a line right here and I'm going to see how good I can do. Now, one way that I'm going to go about preventing shaky lines is I'm going to make sure that I have adequate ink flow, first of all, because I've experienced inconsistent lines. Even though my posture and everything else was aligned incorrect, I didn't have adequate ink flow, so therefore when the needle penetrated, the ink flow wasn't consistent and only some half of the needle would get ink, the other half would penetrate with no ink, so therefore the line looked inconsistent even though my technique was correct. So you want to make sure that you get a good consistent ink flow going on, and that can be developed with practice. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep my site. I never really put too much ointment. You only need a little bit when you're tattooing human skin. So I'm going to always prep the area with some ointment, moisturize the area. And then right here, I always have a little bit of moisturizer or a little bit of inkies right here as well to help me glide across more easily. I find the posture that I am comfortable with as well And all of these little variables that I'm doing here are adding up, and they're gonna provide me with more clean, consistent results. And again, this is going to be to each their own. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it. I'm saying this is what works best for me and how to prevent shaky lines. So you can see I'm comfortable with the gear that I'm using. I'm using a short pen style tattoo machine, and I'm comfortable with the way that I'm holding it. So I'm comfortable with my posture. I'm going to pull the line from this direction this way. And I'm just going to do the best that I can. Now you're going to notice that when I clean this line, it's not going to be by any means perfect. As you can see, I'm starting to wobble now because I'm outside of my comfort zone. And you can see I'm going off course now. And that's exactly what happened. As you can see, it kind of went that way right there. And that's what I was explaining earlier. That's one of the main reasons as well as why I experience shaky lines. So when you combine your discomfort when you're outside of your range with a smaller needle configuration, and once these wrong choices start adding up, it's gonna start showing in the work. So really learning to align all of the basics and the fundamentals, I feel, is crucial to being able to pull clean, consistent lines to avoid shaky lines all in general. And let's take a closer look here. So you can see I started off comfortable right here. Started off comfortable, and let me actually zoom in. Started off comfortable, we were doing great, and when I was here, as you can see, I started getting outside of my comfort zone, and these wobbles right here started happening. Let me face it your way. Keep in mind, they're not totally dramatic. However, when I first started, it was nothing like this. To have achieved something like that when I first started, I would have been astonished. I was trying to, cause wobbles, but naturally they just didn't happen for me. But I'm going to keep demonstrating so that way I can get these points across on what I'm trying to say. And keep in mind, I am using the buck pain 3-round liner, forgive me there. And I'm going to go ahead and pull another line. So let's say if I pull a line going from this way to this way, let's see what happens. So it feels natural, it feels comfortable. Starting to experience a little bit of discomfort. And as I'm going, that discomfort is gradually rising as well. You can see, hence my wobbles, and now I'm at a point where I'm completely outside of my range of comfort. And at this point, I'm just completely trying to push it. And it's just every choice I'm making now is wrong. I should have came out around here, around this point. I should have pulled out of this line, and I should have tapered back in and out and continued accordingly and stayed within my comfort range of motion. Let's go ahead and clean this off and see what we are working with. So as you see, when I get outside of my comfort range right here, I am experiencing dramatic wobbles right here. And keep in mind, this is a smaller needle configuration. So if we're not really dialed in and comfortable with pulling smaller needle configuration lines, then it's gonna show a lot more. I'm gonna actually go out of my way to kind of do some wobbles here and show you what those look like. And also, this kind of goes without saying, but one thing that I never do is I never drink coffee before a tattoo. Any sort of caffeine, stay away from. Anything that's going to make you jittery, stay away from that. I personally have tattooed after I drank a cup or two of coffee, and it was not good. I didn't like the way it felt. I was real like this the entire way. So if you're naturally shaky, then that's going to contribute to shakiness. So a way that you can do that is to find a good posture that you minimize that sort of movement. And for me, this is how I go about doing that. Kind of rest it on there. I'm not squeezing my machine too hard at all. It's actually feeling natural. So what shaky lines would look like is like now we'd probably go this way or this way, and that typically happens when you start going too fast like this, or if again you're just not experienced with what you are doing, if you don't have practice behind the needle configuration that you are using. These are some of the leading causes as to why shaky lines are occurring. I'm way outside of my comfort range. Still gonna stick with it just to show you all and demonstrate the results here. So as you can see, even when we speed up right here, this is what scratching looks like right here. So you can see obviously we're going way too fast for the voltage. We didn't give the needle enough time to input the ink or deposit any sort of ink. And this is essentially gonna fall out over time. This other one right here, it did go sideways. And keep in mind, I'm just essentially imagining a perfect line going across, and that's what I'm trying to get. And I'm achieving everything but that. So you can see with the smaller configuration here, it is harder to stay steady if we don't already have a steady hand. Also, one thing that I want to point out is the smaller the needle configuration is, again, the more that the imperfections are going to show. Let's say if I do the 11 round shader and I wobbled, then they're not as apparent because a shader deposits ink differently, and I'm actually going to show you that here as well. I want to take a look at this 00 1 round liner, and I want to pull some lines with this. Now, I don't recommend ever using a 1 round liner until you're already familiar with other configurations. And then I would step into just the single needle, as we can do some serious damage with this needle right here, as it is just a single needle. So we have to be real careful, real acquainted with pulling lines. I'm going to demonstrate that with this one needle, every single imperfection is going to show up. This is what it looks like. And again, I will leave links for you in the description below. This is just literally one single needle. Be super careful with this and conduct yourself with caution. And for this one, I'm going to take it down to 5 volts even. And that's where I'm going to run this line here. And I'm only going to use a very, very tip of my needle, doing the exact same thing that I was doing. I'm stabilizing myself right here. I'm finding my positioning. And I'm just going to go ahead and go. So I'm way outside of my comfort range already. And you can see it's reflecting in the work that I'm doing. And I just skipped and I wobbled all over the place there. They're a bit squiggly. And I really do hope that I'm getting these points across here. I'm not going out of my way to dramatically demonstrate wiggly lines. I'm doing it in a more practical scenario here. And you can see with that 1 round liner, every imperfection is going to show. Some areas we didn't go deep enough right here. This is going to completely fall out, so it's going to look like a scratched line. However, the smaller we go, the more we show, the more the imperfections show. Some ways right now that I'm preventing shaky lines is I'm moving in directions that I am comfortable with, whether it's going towards me or moving this way. Those are comfortable directions for me. I'm going to demonstrate directions that are uncomfortable so I can show you results, and we can see what happens when we're moving in directions that aren't really going to work in our favor. Still working with the 1 round liner. So I'm going to go from left to right, and then I'll go from right to left. And you can see once I start getting outside of my comfort range and ability here, we wobble. And then if I go from this way to this way, you can see moving in a direction that I'm just totally not comfortable with, which is this direction. I find it hard to remain consistent. So right here, these are just live demonstrations on some of the top reasons that I've experienced wobbling on my end. And for me, all of these are preventable, again, by finding your correct holding style for your machine. I've done an in-depth review on how I go about holding my machine. Check that out. I actually released that a few days ago. So I would recommend though, in order to get cleaner lines, you're gonna wanna stabilize your hand, make sure that you're planning everything out and moving and doing your lines in correspondence to a format that you understand. I'm gonna move from this point to this point because that's where this line is. Let's say we're talking about a leaf. I need to start from the bottom and work my way up because I need to taper out on the ends of the leaves. Little things like that. So you're gonna have to make better choices along the way, and that goes down to planning your tattoo. Also, if you hold your machine at an angle that's not correct or appropriate for tattooing, then you may experience damage and or extreme inconsistency. So as you can see, I'm holding it like a pin and this is what's happening to me. Kind of feels like it's skipping. And I'm trying to be as consistent as I can here, but my holding posture was nowhere near where I am comfortable, and again, it shows. So these are some of the main reasons why I'm personally have experienced shaky lines on my end in the past. Lining with a smaller configuration is not something that I'm going to recommend doing until you're comfortable with pulling lines with all needles. Allow me to demonstrate with a round shader here so that I can show you the thicker the needle is, the less of our imperfections show. So for example, I went from a single needle right here to a 3-round liner, and then now we're going to a 7-round shader. And then I'm going to proceed to show you how I can go about preventing shaky lines. So again, same rule of thumb, I'm placing down my hand, I'm finding comfort, holding the skin in place wherever that may be, and I'm making sure that the direction that I'm going to be pulling the line is comfortable already. So I'm never really rushing into the lines here. I figure it out, I'm planning it all out. So from here, gonna pull the line, stay at a clean, steady hand speed and voltage pace, making sure those are matching, and I stay within my comfort range. And I just continue all the way through until I've completed the line. That is how I go about preventing shaky lines. There's actually multiple variables that are essentially working together to provide me with these results, and the variables are hand speed and voltage, my comfortability when I am positioned, and how comfortable I am in the direction that I am tattooing. All of these are some main variables that come to mind. I'm comfortable with the gear that I am using as well, and I'm very comfortable with the fundamentals of pulling lines. Go ahead and clean these up here. So you can see when I align all of these variables, I'm able to achieve really nice, clean, consistent results. I'm going to try to mimic this, but another reason that I've experienced wobble is when the needle's hanging out way too far. So let me see if that can actually show here with this specific needle. I think this needle has a clean design, so it's going to be very hard to mimic that. Okay, so it was very hard to mimic that needle wobble because of the needle hang. Let me try a different needle. So right now I'm using a DK Lab standard 9-round shader, and I'm hanging out the needle this far. And you can see inadequate ink flow happening, which is also something that I've mentioned. So what I'm doing here is I'm essentially demonstrating real time here some of the ways that I've experienced squiggly, shaky lines here. And as you can see, I'm not doing a very good job at that. This is a CNC Police standard 9-round shader, and I'm hanging out the needle as far as I can hang it out here. I'm not sure if I'm going to necessarily experience any of the needle wobble that I've talked about, but basically what I'm doing is I'm showing you demonstrations on ways that I've experienced shaky lines, and I'm trying to talk about ways to go about preventing them, and as well as exercises here. An exercise that I would recommend working on is figuring out which direction you pull lines comfortably in and getting a fake skin and doing that over and over and over as you see me doing here. When this ink starts running out here, I want to demonstrate inadequate ink flow as well. So you can see right there, even though my technique is correct, the line is still going to look choppy and shaky and incomplete because of the inadequate ink flow. So we have to align all of the variables. We have to align the fundamentals. We have to align the hand speed and voltage with the correct needle depth hang. We have to align the comfortability with our posture, and all of this matters. Everything that we're doing when we're pulling a line. And I know this may sound like a lot. However, this is kind of how I look at it. We have to align all of these fundamentals in order to pull clean, consistent results. Let's say if we're pulling a line and we're not comfortable pulling in this direction. So combine that one variable with the variable of hanging out our needle too far. So let's say we have the wobble of our uncomfortable direction on top of the wobble from the needle hanging out too far. We're going to experience some pretty gnarly lines, and that's what we want to avoid. So getting comfortable with the gear, knowing when your needles start wobbling, knowing how far you like to hang them out, knowing how you like to hold your machine, and just knowing where the dermis is everything. All of these fundamentals are basic things that do a line when we are pulling lines. Allow me to go over this one last time here. So for me to prevent shaky lines, what I am doing is I'm utilizing all that I know in unison to achieve consistent, clean results to the best of my ability. I'm comfortable with the gear that I'm using. I'm moving at a steady hand speed and voltage. I know where the dermis is and I know what it feels like to hit the dermis. So I'm comfortable with everything that I'm doing and I'm confident within the lines. Not only that, I have a plan for my tattoos and I always know where my A to B is. So these are some variables that are helping me to remain confident and consistent throughout my entire tattoo. Every line that I pull, if I pull it this way and each line comes out like that, by the end of the tattoo, I'm gonna have a really good reading tattoo with nice, clean, crispy line work. Another thing that I'm always very cautious of is the line weights that I'm using. I try to stay away from using smaller line weights to dominantly line a tattoo. I'll dominantly line with line weights like round shaders or thicker round liners, and I'll use smaller configurations like 3 round liners for detailed areas. So that's how I approach that. I really don't like to pull long, consistent lines with smaller needle configurations if I don't have to. Because please remember, the lower that we go in needle size, the smaller the needle gets, the more our imperfections are going to show, and that's something that we have to consider as well. Once we're able to find a workflow where we align all of these variables together in unison, you're going to start seeing more cleaner, consistent results. Here is a top view of what we did right here in this demonstration. To conclude the video, I'm going to relay some final tips just to kind of reiterate everything that I went over. So some solid ways to go about preventing shaky lines is starting from the bottom, being comfortable and getting comfortable with the gear that you are using, figuring out your needle depth, how far you like to hang your needle out, figure out your hand speed and voltages. These are all the fundamentals that will help you pull cleaner, consistent lines. After you've developed rapport and gotten comfortable and established with your gear, you're going to want to go ahead and start lining, and I would recommend to start with thicker line weights, and then as you get comfortable and fluid with thicker line weights and you can pull clean lines back to back to back to back every single time, then go down to smaller line weights and kind of work from there. So all of this, you can do it in stepping stones. I feel if you do it in stepping stones and do it one step at a time, you will get to where you're going. If I didn't touch base on anything specific that you may have wanted to know at any point throughout this video, I'm going to encourage you, drop a comment down below. I'm going to do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. I also have social medias all under the same name as this YouTube channel. I would truly appreciate the support on there as well. Thank you for tuning in yet again. You have a great day.